Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. Hope you're having a great day as we continue to celebrate all the interesting characters and people who are working so hard in the trenches of Mississippi to make this such a great place to live, work, and play. You know, I was thinking a lot about redemption this morning because I ran across a quote from John Paul II, Saint John Paul II, who I told Ann after I read this quote that we're so blessed to have had our marriage blessed by him. I have a unique relationship with a priest, Monsignor, who had a relationship with John Paul II, and have this wonderful framed blessing from him in our bedroom. And gosh, we're so lucky to have that. But this quote that I ran across about redemption was this: "There is no sin that God's mercy cannot reach." And it got me thinking a little bit more about redemption. I think about the last 4 years and the guests that I've had on this show, some of them having redemption from bad decisions in their lives or drug and alcohol addiction, or maybe just big regrets. So many different causes that create a compelling case for action to seek redemption. And, you know, you're never too old to seek redemption, that is for sure. But you know, there's I think a constant when you hear the stories of redemption, you come to the realization that you're inspired by them. And I think we're all, you know, whether we're literally seeking redemption or not, we're all, I think, seeking to be better people and to leave positive legacies and all of that. So I got to looking, and I found a few other quotes about redemption that I want to share with you this morning. Then we have a great guest who probably knows a little bit more about redemption than I could ever speak about. But one from Martin Luther King Jr. In the end, we will not remember the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. It's pretty powerful, actually. John Piper once said this: "Redemption is not perfection. The redeemed must realize their imperfections." You know, I think that's probably true. You know, that for us to seek redemption, we got to come to the realization that we're human. And we're just not perfect. You know, we're going to make mistakes and do all of that. And that's okay. That's part of being a human being. Let's see. George Eliot once said, it is never too late to be what you might have been. It is never too late to be what you might have been. That's a good one, isn't it? And then the last one is unknown. Redemption is a beautiful thing. It has the power to liberate us from the past and transform our lives for the better. I mean, when people think about redemption, that's what they think about. Redemption being a beautiful thing. It has the power to liberate us from the past and transform our lives for the better. You know, people who are listening to the show today, I bet there's always an aspect of you that's seeking some form of redemption. And that means you're trying to make yourself a better person. And there's absolutely nothing wrong about that. And if you find some inspiration and the various guests that I have on this show to help you in that endeavor, then I think we've achieved our goal with this show. So without any further ado, let me go to my first guest today. Is Reverend Scott Lenoir. He's an Episcopal priest who's living in Gautier. He recently wrote a book. We're going to talk about that book specifically here in just a second. But before we go any further, let me welcome Reverend Lenoir, Scott, to the Ricky Matthews Show. How you doing, Scott?
I'm doing fine. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I appreciate it. I've done many interviews in my life, but I think this is the first one where somebody's interviewing me, and yay.
Hey, that's good. It's always good to kind of flip the mic a bit. Yeah. But, you know, I saw you. One of the beauties of being able to do this show for the SuperTalk TV, Facebook, and YouTube audiences is that I get to see my guests when we're together. And people say, "Do you miss going to the studio?" I said, "No, not at all. Actually, you know, being able to use Skype to have these conversations gives me the chance to see you in your world. You know, I get to see where you're sitting, and you're more comfortable because you're in your world and not in some kind of intimidating studio. Of course, you wouldn't be intimidated by the studio because speaking and inspiring people has been your career, but it's good to see you in your world. It's good to see you here. You know, but I got to see, while I was sharing these quotes about redemption, I got to see your face while I was reading those quotes. You they're probably all familiar to you, but redemption is something you spent literally a career thinking about, isn't it?
Well, I believe one of the things that has to happen for me was to eventually surrender. The fact that I'm not the center of the world, and there is my spiritual foundations that allow me to try to do more of what I think God's desires are for my life. And so I believe all of us, like you said, we're not perfect. We do things that alienate us from the love of God and from other people. But that's not the end of the story. It's hopefully, at the end of the day, we can look back on the day and see where we went astray and then, do something to fix that. If we need to talk to somebody, that's what we need to do and make amends for whatever we have done or left undone. And you move from there. But to hold it all in and just, let our failures sort of define who we are is certainly not what our higher power has in mind for us.
We celebrated, I say celebrated, that is absolutely the wrong word, but we observed the anniversary of Hurricane Katrina recently. And, if I had to think back at the thing that touched me the most in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, as we looked around and saw so much, the utter devastation and so many people impacted and so on, that if there's one word that helped me and those around me create or make us able to overcome, get our head above, let's say, the debris and look ahead, it was hope. Mm-hmm. Hope is a powerful thing, isn't it?
It is. And when we lose that hope, we sort of move down on the level of just existing for no purpose. If we can find that purpose and start working toward it, it may be, Hurricane Katrina was just beyond everybody's concept of destruction. And I was at Camp Coast Care for a long time with other people. I lived in Madison County at the time, but myself and former Bishop of Mississippi, Brian Sage, we got together and had many trips down here. And as well as other people, we brought people with us. I'm sorry if my goodness and mercy are behind me. They follow me all the days of my life, and they are barking.
Hey, that's okay. Hey, listen, that's we when we hear kids in the background or a dog or whatever, that's authenticity, man. Just keep on. You're good.
But anyway, Katrina was a defining moment that really relied on our being able to project into the future of what we can do. And the coast was just remarkable in the resilience that people had in the midst of absolute destruction. Mucking out houses and things like that. But that's something that we never want to go through, but you got to get to those nitty gritty details, and then things start to look a little brighter. And Camp Coast Care was a big part of that and aided so much. Okay, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. So look, but hope is a powerful thing when you're dealing with something like Hurricane Katrina. Hope is a powerful thing when you're dealing with something like addiction of some sort. Hope is a powerful thing when you're thinking about self-sabotage. It's a great thing when you're pursuing redemption. In fact, all of those elements kind of come together in the book that you wrote, The Amendment, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a second. But I was interested in learning about from your bio that really early in your career you actually were in broadcasting. And I spend a lot of time in the Mississippi Delta. I have a place up there, at least 3 different farms in the Mississippi Delta, and enjoy spending a lot of time up there. And but Greenwood areas, I spent a lot of my time there. But you kind of started your career working in Greenwood in the Delta.
Yes, I did. And actually, it was back in Macomb, Mississippi, that I first got involved with WAPF, WCCA.
Hey, why don't we do this? We're going to pick it up from right there. I didn't realize we were to the end of the segment. But when we get back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation with Scott Lenoir. He's a Episcopal priest here in coastal Mississippi, and recently wrote a book. We'll tell you a little more about that book here in just a second. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show. We have Reverend Scott Lenoir, who is an Episcopal priest and recently wrote a book. We'll talk about the book here in just a second. But when we went to break, we were talking about, giving you a sense of, his biography and sort of early in his life. And he was mentioning Macomb when we went to break. So why don't you pick it up from there, Scott?
Well, the first job I ever had was at WAPF, WCCA in Macomb. They were simulcast at the time, and I was a relief jock for all of the vacationing guys. And so that's where I got my feet wet into broadcasting. And then as I went to high school, I went to high school at Webb School in Bell Buckle, Tennessee. I was a very creative child, is how I looked. That's how I ended up in a boarding school, and I was a creative child, but my parents thought he's going the way that we don't like. So, we just need to, she said, we're going to send you to a military school. And I said, well, can we negotiate? And so I went to Webb, and I ended up working at, part-time at, WMOT, Middle Tennessee State University. And I did a late night show. They let me get off campus to do that, and I had a lot of fun with that. And Webb was a great place. It kind of straightened me out, honestly. So my parents were right. Flags. But I went to Greenwood, as you said, and I worked for for Pete's sakes,
ABG.
Thank you, Ricky. Your memory is good. WABG TV, and I also did some radio work there, and I worked in the news department, and to my eternal embarrassment, they hired me and put me on the air as a weather man. I knew nothing about that. So I ripped and read, and learned how to do things. And we didn't have all the character generator stuff that we do now. And it was kind of clumsy, but, I feel sorry for the farmers, the most important people in the area, looking at somebody who knew nothing about weather. But anyway, eventually I went to straight reporting and anchor. So.
Yeah. That's so interesting. And eventually sort of found your way to Divinity School. And there was really no looking back after that, wasn't there? Was there?
Well, I really thought I was in this for broadcasting forever. And then the season of Lent came along one year, and I went to church and saw all this list of services that were able to go to, where you look and you reevaluate things and think about things. And I started feeling, I talked with the priest there about, how to discerning a call to the priesthood. And I'll never forget when my wife was going, looking back on some stuff, she said, I was praying for you to be, a little bit more involved with the church, but I never had any idea that that's what you were going to do. But we went to seminary in 1983, 4. Yeah. Maybe it was 85. I don't know. It was just 3 years later, I was ordained, and I've been in Mississippi, the Diocese of Mississippi, for that long, so 36 years, and I never left. And I preferred smaller churches. I did do, a large church in Greenville, and then back to small church, back to being an assistant when I just had to move away from the coast for a while. Health stuff,
Mm-hmm.
But health stuff on the coast is a lot more sophisticated than it was, 25 years ago. And I had a great time, and I wrote through those times, but just never too much fiction. It was always nonfiction articles, and I became the editor for the Mississippi Episcopalian, which is a funny story and how I got that.
But what's good about that, though, being an editor and writing, writing is the kind of thing that when you do it a lot, you get better at it. You get better word choices and developing narratives, even if what you were doing was all based on news, et cetera. That experience combined with your experience as a priest really set the stage for the amendment, the book that you wrote. And I like the last sentence of this sort of review of the book says the novel is an electrifying tale of revenge, redemption, and a good man trying to right a series of wrongs. Sounds like you had fun writing this book.
I did, and it was kind of on the back burner for a long time. I just didn't have time to devote to fiction. But after I retired, it became more time, even though I'm a failure at retirement. I'll just tell you that. But I have enjoyed the book, and people, having a writing group helps me. I mean, it doesn't help everybody, but it helps me because people can objectively critique what's going on and say, hey, this doesn't sound like two people talking to each other. This sounds different. You need to fix that. Things like that are helpful, when in the process of writing, because I majored in English as an undergrad, and that can be a hamper to things, actually, because I don't know, I want to speak in complete sentences all the time. Write complete sentences, subject, verb, predicate, and all. And that's not the way that people in dialogue speak to each other.
Hey, I tell you an interesting thing, having come from, as a publisher for last 16 years of my career and being around some of the best writers, Pulitzer Prize winning writers and editors. So I got to observe some of the best, writers around, people who were absolutely incredibly good at it. And I will sometimes sit in my kitchen and listen to my wife and my daughter, and then maybe my daughter-in-law and some others, and I'll listen to the conversation that we're having. Some direct conversations and maybe side conversations happening simultaneously. And then I would think to myself, now, how would I capture what I just heard? And, to be a good writer, it's really hard to capture what I just said. It's really hard. You have to have an ear for it, don't you?
Well, I have to listen. I listen how people talk to each other more now than I did before. I try to pay attention to them, but I also listen to how people phrase things and to how I phrase things. And that helps so much whenever I'm trying to give some definition to a character, for example. Someone may be that sort of very formally speaking person, which reveals a little something about that person's character. And it may reveal a little pomposity on the part of that person's character. And then there's somebody that's just very informal, sort of I don't know how to say it, country sound, they don't, not good, verbal sentences, just kind of make up things.
Oh, listen, man, I look back on it, and I became super infatuated with literature, and I think about Tennessee Williams as a playwright and what he was able to capture and how he did it. Mark Twain, for example, I'm a big fan of Ernest Hemingway. Wow, could he capture what you and I are talking about? But in your book, you talk about Blake, and Blake had some big challenges in his life, didn't he?
He does. He really, and starting off on page 1, we recognize Blake as you go through that first chapter as being someone who is simply existing and not engaging in life. He's given up. He's in grief and a good degree of self-sabotage in there because he's a banker. He's never was a banker before, but there was reasons why he turned into that. And I felt like I gave him a character of being an alcoholic also who's in recovery, but he doesn't engage recovery in the same way that he helped a lot of people, but he just can't help himself. And that's why he's stuck with the grief of his wife's death and just incredible guilt that is not.
Why don't we do this? Stick around for just a few minutes, and we'll kind of wrap it up about the book on the other side, and then we'll be moving over to Ann Petrie from the Hancock County Chamber. Hang with us for just a second. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show. We're visiting with Reverend Scott Lenoir, and I can't help but think about this George Eliot quote, Scott, that said, "It is never too late to be what you might have been." Your character, Blake, that kind of describes in some ways his story of redemption. Kind of, what's the amendment, the book that you wrote, what's the elevator story that you tell people about when you're talking about it?
Blake Weaver starts off a mess, but he gets motivated in an unusual way, but he's motivated by revenge, and he takes the revenge against someone that he blames for the death of his wife. But he also starts looking at things and wants to make an amend to a young Episcopal priest who finds himself on the Mississippi Gulf Coast in Biloxi. And he figures out through the help of friends, some of them very unexpected friends, how to make this amend. But Philip Mason, the villain of the book, is very clever, and he is chasing after Blake to stop him from what he wants to do. And so that's
sounds like an interesting book. You got some book signings coming up.
I do. Thursday from 4:30 to 6, I'll be at Trinity Episcopal Church in Hattiesburg, and I'll do that signing. And then I'm fortunate to be a part of the Mississippi Book Festival, which will be September 14th in Jackson from 9 a.m. to 4, I think. It's a long festival, and it's on the Capitol grounds, and I hope people will come out to see all of the writers that are available for actually visiting with and buying books if motivated. So.
Well, that's terrific, man. And by the way, the Mississippi Book Festival, we've talked about it several times on the show. It's turned out to be one of the kind of go-to festivals if you enjoy books in Mississippi. Hey, listen, Scott, it's been a pleasure to spend some time with you, my friend.
Thank you so much, Ricky. I appreciate the time, and you all have a great day. And
you bet. God bless you, my friend. Yes. This has been Reverend Scott Lenoir. Pick up his book, The Amendment. I think you'll be glad you did.